Asta is a great free-to-play supporting unit that's been waiting for her turn to be picked over Tingyun, Bronya, and now the cooler Bronya. But actually, since Silverwolf's release, Asta has become an even better character, enabling teams to better take advantage of enemy debuffs with speed on your team, and the ability to break a lot of gauge. But most importantly, Asta makes Arlen an S-tier unit, at least S-tier at managing Asta's spending problem. Today, I'm gonna clear up any confusion on how to build and play Asta, and talk about how you can best use her in Honkai Star Rail. She is free, after all. Now, with all that being said, my name is Braxophone, and let's talk about Asta. Asta's kit is really easy to follow and get value from. She's the best free-to-play cheerleader, giving enemies tons of attitude
Remember inviting you.
and you tons of speed and attack buffs. Her talent is one of the main parts of her kit. It's gonna give you an attack buff based on her charging stack mechanic. You get 1 stack for every enemy hit by Asta, and an extra stack for every enemy hit that has a fire weakness. The attack bonus might seem kinda small, especially in early game, but remember, it's party-wide and based on stacks. So if you have 5 stacks at talent level 8, your entire team is getting a 60% attack buff, which is almost 1.5 attack relics. Granted, on average, that number will be a bit lower since you won't always have maximum stacks, but it's a pretty good perspective on the value that she can bring to your team. The major downside to this mechanic is that you lose 3 stacks every turn, starting on Asta's 2nd turn at Eidolon 0, which means that keeping this buff up can be pretty difficult, and you'll need to use her skill a fair bit in order to get maximum value. However, this awesome ability does come at a cost. Her damage is pretty mid. She has a low base attack, and her light cones don't do her many favors for damage. The most damage you'll get out of her is with her skill, which has a bounce that goes off 5 times in total. And at skill level 8, you're dealing about 43% attack multiplier per bounce, and it does add up, but typically she's not going to contribute a ton in the same way someone like Silverwolf does. But with that said, because she does have her own attack buff, and she can break a lot of toughness with her skill, she is worth building for damage, and potentially even break later on. Now that Silverwolf is out, it's even easier than before to break with her, and overall, she just got a lot better. Her basic attack isn't anything special, except for when you unlock her trace that gives her fire damage over time that you can apply. You're not going to be spamming basic attacks on her, but this can add a bit of damage. Her trace Ignite increases all allies' fire damage by 18%, which is pretty significant if you're playing a fire damage dealer, and her last trace, Constellation, wait Mona, is that you? Increases her defense by 6% for every charging stack she has, which I'm gonna be honest, I think this is a really late April Fool's prank. I think they meant to give her extra charging stacks, but just forgot to change it back, so I'll make sure to email them or something. I'm sure they'll get it figured out. Asta has a few different rotation options in high-level content. For most players, you're going to end up using a combo of 2 skills and 1 basic attack, which makes you -1 skill point over 3 attacks, but can allow you to get Asta's ult once every 3 turns. This is pretty easy to manage with the right supports in your team. If you're really low investment on Asta though, without Eidolons, you also have the choice to alternate skill and basic attacks, and if you play this way, it will take you longer on average to get your Asta ult, but you don't have to worry about skill point management as much. In my opinion, the best way to play her for most players is to shoot for ult once every 3 turns, but there's also a way to build Asta to ult once every 2 turns if you have E4. And to be clear, all of what I just said is after build, it's not just talking about raw energy gains. Most people think of this build as a meme, and it kind of is, but it does unironically work at high investment, and I'll talk about how to do it later on in the guide. There's some ways to circumvent her energy problems, but your goal is realistically 3-turn ultimate unless you're at giga high investment and can actually follow the 2-turn ult build. Asta's ultimate is one of her best assets, where she massively increases your team's speed for 2 turns. In fact, she does so much for your speed that you might as well call her Fasta. Sorry. What this does is let you attack more over a cycle and effectively output more damage in a shorter amount of time, which lets you also take bigger advantage of debuffs on enemies by not allowing them to take their turn before you dish out tons of damage. This is essentially her biggest asset aside from her parents' bank account. Because her ultimate is so important but also costs 120 energy, it creates some pretty big problems for her energy overall. You know what else costs a lot of energy? Making these videos. I love doing it, but it does take me quite a while to put all of the scripting, research, voiceover and gameplay together. So if you like these kinds of videos, consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. We are almost at 200k, and when we get there, I have an awesome surprise for you guys. Anyways, if you do all that, it lets me know that you want to see more content from me, and it really helps me out. Thanks for all the support, everyone. Back to the video. For Trace level priority, I would level up her talent and her ultimate first, but you can level up her skill if you want to get some more damage out of her. The speed buff from Asta is great and gets your team more attacks in a short time, but it only lasts for 2 turns, and if you're attacking faster, those turns go by pretty quick. At the moment, there's not a consistent, reliable, and practical way to get her speed buff up with 100% uptime. That may change in the future, however. I'll talk about how to fix her energy issues in the build and team sections, but she also has some Eidolons that help a bit with that, so let's talk about those next. So Asta's biggest problem as a character is that her kit is really insanely good, but it is specifically insanely good if you have Eidolons. If you don't have Eidolons, she's going to feel a lot worse to play. That doesn't mean she's impossible to play, and you obviously can build her and make use out of her, but it's a lot harder to play her without Eidolons than it is with. Of course, that's true for most characters, but in Asta's case, it affects her energy gain and how often she can use her ultimate and how easy it is to maintain her buff. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Her first Eidolon gives you an extra hit on her skill, which can give you a slightly higher chance of hitting a different enemy and getting another charge stack. But the most important thing about her E1 is that it gives you extra energy on the extra hit. Normally, a skill gives 30 energy, but Asta's skill with E1 can give you 36 energy, which, believe it or not, really changes how you build her. E2 is the first major stepping stone for Eidolons, though, because if you get E2, you can temporarily stop Asta from losing stack charge after you use your ultimate for 1 turn. This basically means that you can maintain the buff strength for longer, and against boss enemies, you can stop your stacks from draining as fast. E3 is a gaming convention, I think, but it also levels up her skill and talent, which helps her attack buff get higher. E4 is going to be the next major Eidolon for Asta that you absolutely need to make her best. It's going to make it so that she has 15% more energy regen while she has 2 or more stacks of charge. This Eidolon will unironically make or break Asta in some energy scenarios based on things like if you took damage, if you're running sprightly you know what I mean, if you're trying not to use as many skills, what the weather's like outside, etc. If you want to reliably get her ultimate up in 2 to 3 turns instead of 4, this Eidolon helps out a ton. I haven't talked about her build yet, but a lot of people say that if you have E4, you don't need energy regen rope. That's only true in some cases. I'll go into more detail in the Relic and Light Cone sections, but just know that this Eidolon alone will not solve her energy issues, especially since against bosses, you can struggle to keep up the 2 charge stacks you need to actually activate it, unless you're ulting every 2 turns. E5 is ultimate and basic level, which is nice to have, and E6 is another game-changing Eidolon that comes together with her other ones in order to make her a more complete unit. E6 makes it so that she loses 1 less stack of charge every turn, so now instead of 3 charges, she'll only lose 2 every turn, which means that whenever you ultimate, as long as you're getting 2 charge stacks per turn by playing her into a fire weak enemy, you'll eventually be able to get max stacks against just 1 enemy. Now, it will take a few turns though, so that's something to keep in mind. I didn't make this section to scare you away from Asta, but more so to give you a reference. To make the absolute most out of this character, you're gonna need to spend more than Arlen is probably comfortable with. If you want to truly take advantage of her massive speed and attack boost, you're gonna need some copies of her, which will honestly just come with time for free-to-play players. Nonetheless, she is usable at E0, just with less consistent attack buff and less frequent speed buffs. But as I said, there's a few ways to circumvent that, so let's talk about her build next, starting with light cones and energy. Before I go over some of Asta's best light cone options, I want to talk about her energy issues. Asta's Genshin counterpart has the same problem. Maybe it's just an astronomy thing, I don't really know. Depending on if you have Eidolon 4 and energy regen rope, sprightly Von Wa, and if you take any hits of damage or KO enemies, you can determine what light cone you need to run on Asta. Now, I highly recommend a rotation of skill basic to not drain your skill point wallet entirely, but if you don't have Eidolon 4, that can cause a bit of trouble for you, because there may be some instances where you just spam skill and just go completely negative the entire time. However, there are ways to fix this. If you don't have Eidolon 4, I recommend one of these 2 light cones, which are Memories of the Past and Meshing Cogs. Memories of the Past is a gacha light cone that gives you 4 energy back after you attack, and also some break effect at S1. Break effect is a great stat on Asta since she shreds through enemy toughness and dishes out a lot of damage when she gets the break. But more importantly than that, she needs energy. For most players, your top priority priority with this character should be getting your ult in 3 turns, unless you know what you're doing and have an E6 Asta that can get her ult up in 2 turns. So here's what you can expect for different combinations of energy regen rope, Eidolon 4, Sprightly Von Wach, and light cones that give energy back. Anything in the yellow means that you have to take damage or KO an enemy to confirm the ult in 3 turns, which honestly is a pretty fair assumption to make. Odds are you'll be able to get hit once across 3 turns. And if you're unsure about it, you can always just put Asta next to your tank. So you can use any combo that is yellow, but if you want to be extra safe, you want to aim for the green boxes. But Brax, I only have sweat memories in the past, and that's not enough energy. Well, buckle up, because I've got news for you. The free-to-play light cone meshing cogs gives the same amount of energy back, but is much easier to superimpose and get higher energy amounts back. If you can't get yourself into the green zone for energy in 3 attacks, throw meshing cogs onto Asta to fix those energy issues and get her ult up super fast. Highly recommend meshing cogs if you're having energy issues. If you have a high investment Asta with Eidolons, here's what you can do in 2 turns. You're a little less likely to take damage in 2 turns than 3, but it is still possible, though I would just recommend sticking to the green zone here. And then here's a reference for the other rotation options and what those look like for your energy management. On all of these charts, if you landed in the area with a bolded and underlined text, you can run a break effect or attack rope, which I'm going to talk about in the Relics section coming up. Now, if you have But the Battle Isn't Over, this can also help out with Asta's energy problems as well, and for getting her ult up quickly, this light cone can make the difference in some situation. It's not as much energy as the other light cones mentioned, but it's a pretty solid bonus. The buff to your next ally is pretty unreliable with Asta, but when it lines up, it is great, and you also get skill points back for using your ult once every other use. If you have E4 and an ER rope, But the Battle Isn't Over is going to be one of your top options for Asta. Now, other than that, your best options will be Dance 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 for advancing your whole team forward a few times throughout the fight, Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds for some solid all-around buffs, Planetary Rendezvous if you're playing a fire damage dealer, and Chorus for the attack buff if you have literally nothing else. I should also point out that if you're not having energy problems at all, then I'd actually recommend Dance 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 the most. But like I said, for most people, you're probably going to have issues getting your ult up every 3 turns, so those light cones that give you energy back are pretty dang good. So with all of that in mind, there are 2 Asta builds, one being a consistent support build that most people will use, and the second being a stronger but very situational break effect build. So let's go ahead and talk about those. Like with Blue Asta in Genshin Impact, Red Asta in Honkai Star Rail has a need for energy, and lots of ways to get it. But before we talk stats, let me go over her sets with you. To be honest, her set doesn't matter too much, but it's worth noting that Asta can add a decent chunk of damage to your team. It's not amazing damage, it's not top tier damage, but it is worth doing because, like, what else are you gonna do with her? Hypothetically, you could build her on the Lava Forging set for fire damage, and at 4 pieces, bonus skill damage and even more fire damage. Because she breaks a lot, you also have the option of going Thief of Shooting Meteor as well, which will also give you a bit of energy back on break. But because Asta wants to be fast to build up ult frequently, I personally recommend 4-piece Wild Wheat, which gives you some speed and attack for having all 4 pieces. And that speed could be the difference between her taking an extra turn or not in Memory of Chaos, and it can lead to huge results in a practical setting. You can mix any of these 2-piece sets, and that's also fine, but ideally you want Asta to be Fasta. Speaking of Fasta, if a new Relic set happens to come out in the future that gives you something like speed on the 2-piece or has party buffs on the 4-piece, it will probably be Asta's new best in slot. So to anyone viewing in the year 2032, you can't laugh at me anymore, lolget. For main stats, ideally at the end of the game, you'll have a crit rate or damage body piece, but attack is also okay. Speed boots, fire damage sphere, and energy regen rope are the rest of your build. Ideally, you're looking for crit and speed substats, but break effect is pretty okay too. In a perfect world, you would want at least 50 to 100 crit rate to crit damage ratio, but there's no hard set rule on it. For planar sets, the easiest thing to build is Fleet of the Ageless, which gives your whole team an attack bonus for existing and having above 120 speed. Technically though, you can run Kingdom of Banditry on her for some break effect to help your overall damage if you're breaking a lot. If you're short energy, you can run Sprightly Von Wach, but most of the time, it's not going to be enough energy to be game changing. Again, you can reference this chart to see if that would put you in the green for your specific scenario. If you can ult every 2 turns with 2 skills and can afford to go skill point negative, that would be ideal, but most players are going to sit in the 3-turn range. And if you find that you land in the underlined bolded zone of this chart with your setup, or you can land in that zone with your setup, then you can actually go for a break effect rope. And we'll talk about that build next. So here's the build summary, but if you want to dish out a fair bit more damage with your Asta, and you have the means to do it, here's another build centered around break effect. If you're a break Chad, you can always run Asta with a break effect rope. Now, to be clear, I do not recommend this option unless you have enough energy coming back to Asta to ult once every 3 turns without energy regen on your rope. But honestly, I can't really stop you from committing atrocious crimes on your own time, even if I wanted to. If you're on a team with Silverwolf or against enemies that are weak to fire, Asta can break a lot of toughness gauge with her skill, and because of that, she has a higher chance to be the one to break an enemy and deal high damage. Asta's personal damage is normally just okay, but if you manage to control your breaks to some degree, Asta can actually add a lot of damage with her fire breaks. Now, to take full advantage of that, you want to run a set like Thief of Shooting Meteor for extra break effect and energy back, but you can also go for something like Wild Wheat to give Asta some more speed and more attack, leading to more break opportunities. For main stats, since break doesn't worry about crit stats, you can just go with attack on the body piece, speed boots, fire damage orb, and break effect rope. For substats, going for speed and break effect is going to give you a lot of value, but attack subs are also okay. For planar sets, Kingdom of Banditry is going to be your best option to stack up that break value, but you can still opt for Fleet of the Ageless or Sprightly if you need it for more energy. To make break effect rope work optimally, most of the time you need to be using S5 meshing cogs or ideally memories of the past to take advantage of those extra stats and energy. Because remember that Asta's best utility is her ultimate that's going to make your entire team attack more frequently and overall increase your team's damage. However, like I said, you can play the game however you want, and that's just my personal recommendation. The break build is usable at low investment as well if you don't have good crit pieces, so that's something to consider as well. So now that you've been watching this video for like 20 minutes, I don't know, by the time I cut it down, it might be like 15 or something, I want to go ahead and talk about where Asta shines in teams. So honestly, you can just put Asta anywhere. Thanks for watching. I do have a few tips for you just based on energy and some team pairings that you can use with her. For example, there was that yellow zone that I was showing on the charts earlier. If you're in the yellow zone for energy where you need to either take a hit or get a KO in order to finish off getting her ultimate in 3 turns, there's a couple things you can do. One of those things is you can put her right next to a tanking character or a character with a taunt or high taunt value, and that'll basically make it so that when enemies attack that character, if there's a cleave attack, it will also hit Asta. Now, there's also situations though where this can be a little bit problematic, because in my genuine guide, I also said, put him next to your tank. So what do? Well, you put the tank like right in between them, and then they just both get hit with the cleave. Now, the downside of this is obviously you need to heal more if this is the case. You're gonna basically have to run a healer because both these characters are gonna slowly get chipped away at, in which case a Fire Blazer and a healer won't be like super helpful for you because you're only gonna have one buffer and no debuffers. So ultimately your damage is going to suffer a little bit having to run a healer and a shielder like Fire Blazer. But for general content, when you're not doing Memory of Chaos, this can be kind of nice. And if you are doing something like Memory of Chaos, you can go ahead and throw Japard up in there. I don't have Japard on this account, but Japard would basically fix this problem because he's able to constantly create shields, and you only need to run Japard. It's just in the example of Fire Blazer where you're going to slowly lose HP over time that is going to be a little bit difficult to keep both these characters up. Now, contrary to popular belief, I actually put Jingyuan up here, but a lot of people say that Asta and Jingyuan aren't good because Asta isn't going to really help out your Lightning Lord, but the benefit of this is actually that you can get more Jingyuan attacks in, which does actually affect Lightning Lord, which is, you know, pretty solid. As for other pairings you can do, I personally like to run her with debuffers. Silverwolf is a really great pairing for Asta, and the reason for that is that Silverwolf can apply Fire Weakness if the enemy doesn't already have it, but also because she's going to debuff enemies. So Asta is going to be your attack buff, Silverwolf is going to be the defense and resistance shred on enemies, and those two things in tandem can help you dish out a lot of damage with your carry. This can apply to characters like Zila, it can apply to Susong, etc, etc. The other downside with this is obviously if you run someone that's not a fire DPS, like if you're not running Hook, for example, then that can create some issues where like, oh, maybe you implant the other weakness. Maybe you're also running Wealth and you implant Imaginary instead of Fire. But generally speaking, if you know what you're doing, you can run someone like Zila, Silverwolf, Fire MC, and Asta, and between the break you're gonna have with Asta, Silverwolf, and Zila, and also the break that you get from Fire MC, because believe it or not, it's actually pretty solid, you can probably slide through some of the Memory of Chaos even with just this setup without a healer, just based on the fact that you're gonna have the enemy broken so frequently. You're gonna have buffs from Asta, you're gonna have debuffs on Silverwolf, and Asta is gonna help your team get more attacks during those debuffs that Silverwolf gives out. Now, me personally, I haven't cleared the highest floor of Memory of Chaos with this team, team, but I don't want to rule it out yet because we are really early in the game and most people, including myself, don't actually have maxed out relics yet. But this is just one example of a team that you can try out and use. And if we get a fire abundance character that can replace fire MC, this team could pop off for real. Basically, like, you can just throw Asta in anywhere. Honestly, she's just a good general speed and attack buffer, and most teams are going to benefit. You can also use like Pela instead, and you're going to be able to get a lot more attacks during Pela's debuff time, which is pretty dang cool. Very cool, Asta. Thank you for sharing. Anyways, that's basically the guide. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you didn't enjoy and you absolutely hated every second of this video, you know what? That's okay too. We're all allowed to have opinions, even if they're wrong. I'll catch you guys later, gamers. See ya! Subscribe for more!